as a kid, I had a really severe concussion and I was really overweight and I was video game addicted. And I got the home based version of Dance Dance Revolution. And I danced my brain off. Like that thing got so much mileage. That's what I did. And I lost a ton of weight. I improved my cognition. I got better in school. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I felt better. But I was not good in school. I was not good socially. Like I had these concussion symptoms that were really getting in the way of my life. My parents didn't know any better, didn't know what it was coming from, didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know any better. But it just happened to be I really improved my life because of this approach of active video games.
Hello, this is Anthony Effinger. I'm the host of the Think Neuro podcast at Pacific Neuroscience Institute. And today I am speaking with Ryan Glatt. He is a brain health coach and he's the director of the Fit Brain program at PNI. Ryan, thanks for coming on again.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. What's going on?
So I want you to tell us a little bit about the Fit Brain program to start with.
Absolutely. So the Fit Brain program at its core is a program that trains both the brain and body at the same time. And so a lot of people have concerns associated with aging. Some of those concerns, or at least a lot of those concerns, have to do with falls and fall prevention or fall risk. And then the other biggest concern that people have is associated with cognition or certain mental functions, specifically memory, but also things like processing speed and reaction time and executive functioning, impulse control. And we can describe those, define those, talk about how they show up in real life and how we train them in our program. But ultimately, people want to improve their balance and they want to improve their cognition. And there happens to be something that's been in the literature for quite a long time, but hasn't really been executed in the real world, at least in the way that we're doing it in an interdisciplinary manner and in a comprehensive manner within a clinical setting at PNI. And in order to train the brain and body, we need two things. We need a physical stimulus, some sort of exercise, whether it's pedaling on a bike or marching in place or balancing on a board or something like that. And then the second thing would be a cognitive stimulus. And that cognitive stimulus can be me telling you to do a certain task, like naming a certain number of things or counting in a certain way. But in order to get that cognitive stimulus in a way that's kind of more high tech, more engaging, more fun, we use games. And so we actually incorporate something called exergaming, which is active video games. So you'll be playing on a board and you'll be hitting targets to find the correct answer. You'll be in virtual reality, reaching for different targets while you're pedaling on a bike. And we have a ton of different technologies to train the brain and body at the same time. And this is both called exergaming, but it's also called dual tasking, where you're doing one cognitive and one motor task. There's also other ways to define it, but that's essentially the gist of the Fit Brain program. And it's based off a lot of research showing that things like dual tasking and exergaming can improve balance and can improve certain aspects of cognition in healthy older adults and older adults with mild cognitive impairment, older adults with dementia, persons with Parkinson's disease, persons with MS. And of course, as you know, these are the people we serve at PNI and more. And so for those that are interested in improving those functions, to come to a space where you can play games, have fun, challenge yourself, and not fixate on what you can't do, but what you can do, well, having some of that be evidence-based is a really powerful thing for people. So all to say, it's the Fit Brain program is as a brain body training gym. And one of my favorite things I like to call it is a clinical arcade. And that's actually been used in the literature, and they've used this concept in cardiovascular rehab. And I mean, we've all played games of some kind, whether it be like the New York Times, or for me, I played the Nintendo Wii a lot growing up. As a kid, I lost weight off Dance Dance Revolution. These are all games that get us to move and think at the same time. And I'm still a gamer to this day. I play like virtual reality ping pong. I do boxing in VR. I'm still a big proponent of active video games. And not only is it fun and engaging, but once again, it challenges our minds while also challenging our bodies at the same time.
Okay, so why does this help? Why the dual activity? I mean, are we looking back at evolution and,
Yeah,
why does that
actually,
benefit us?
yeah, we can look back at evolution. And I actually have a colleague, Dr. David Reichland, who's actually on the podcast circuit right now. He's at USC. And Dr. David Reichland is an evolutionary neuroscientist. This guy is awesome. And he has actually published with Dr. Gene Alexander, his colleague, a couple of articles about this thing called it's really a theory called the adaptive capacity model. And the adaptive capacity model posits that as we evolved, we essentially needed to use our brain and body at the same time. There was no caveman that went on a treadmill, got off, went to Erewhon, got something to go, went back to the cave, and then ate it. They actually had to, they had to hunt. And while they were hunting, they had to navigate space. So they had to remember, like navigate, like, have you ever tried to find your car in a parking lot or parking garage? Like, so
Yes.
they had to do that times 30, right? They had to navigate these unmarked spaces. They had to process things and track. They had to go fast, go slow, be running consistently. Like when we think of, I mean, in cartoons and stuff, we think of a caveman as kind of dumb. But when we think of a caveman, like they had to do a lot of stuff in order to get their food, even if it was just foraging. And those things happened while they were moving and thinking at the same time. So he's positing that not only were we consuming larger amounts of animal protein, which allowed the brain to grow, but we actually were stimulating the brain to get it to grow and kind of one fed the other, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
we as primates have this really large frontal lobe. Like the frontal third of our brain is bigger than any primate. And interestingly enough, part of the frontal lobe is these executive functions. And when you dual task, it increases blood flow to that frontal lobe, according to some studies. So it's really interesting to see
Perfect.
like that evolutionary theory. I don't really adopt to like really strong evolutionary theories, but this one makes a lot of sense because it confirms my bias, for one. For two, it's kind of cool to think about it that way. And the brain is so metabolically expensive. It uses a lot of blood
Mm.
flow, it uses a lot of glucose, and so you got to feed it. And I think an easier way to think about this is specific adaptation on imposed demand. And we use this term in exercise science. And specific adaptation on imposed demand, or SAID, the SAID principle, kind of posits use it or lose it. Like the more you use it, the more
Yeah.
the brain or body will adapt to accommodate that utility to become more efficient. I think that's maybe what that model was really trying to get
Mm.
at. And I think with currently with dual tasking, whether it be an active video game or a physical therapist having you count backwards by 12s as you're doing some sort of complex obstacle course, whatever it may be, that seems to have an impact on cognition in
Mm.
terms of benefits. Of course, that depends on the dosage and what they're doing and things like that. It's not a guaranteed benefit just because you're doing it. But after several weeks and months of this type of training with the right dosage and right programmatic approaches, it seems to improve cognition because it uses cognition. And this isn't unique to just dual tasking. I mean, we can't really play tennis, for instance, without paying attention. We
Yeah.
can't really do a dance class without thinking about the choreography. And so dual tasking is maybe like an artificial way of mimicking these brain body tasks that we call neuromotor tasks that include like dance and racket sports and martial arts. And certainly when we do those things and they're more unpredictable and we have to be really thoughtful and really pay attention and respond to new unexpected stimuli, we can improve our cognition in that way. So I think it makes sense when you say use it or lose it, specific adaptation on imposed demand.
So you're a big fan of dance for as an activity, right? For cognition.
Well, so yes, I personally do not dance in the traditional way.
Okay.
As a kid, I had a really severe concussion and I was really overweight and I was video game addicted and I got the home-based version of Dance Dance Revolution and I danced my brain off. Like that thing got so much mileage. Are you familiar with Dance Dance
A
Revolution?
little
It's got
bit.
like,
Yeah.
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 So if you go to like a Dave and Buster's nowadays, or you Google Dance Dance Revolution, you'll see it. It's like a big mat. Either it's a foam
Yeah.
mat or it's a metal pad that's like this thick. It's got four arrows, one up, one down, one left, one right. And you're listening to music. It's kind of crazy, like really poppy Japanese techno music. And it's these arrows scrolling up, and you go left, right, up, down. It's like this multi-directional stepping. And so that's what I did. And I lost a ton of weight. I improved my cognition.
Wow.
I got better in school. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I felt better because I was much, much younger. But I was not good in school. I was not good socially. Like I had these concussion symptoms that were really getting in the
Mm.
way of my life. My parents didn't know any better, didn't know what it was coming from, didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know any better. But it just happened to be I really improved my life because of this approach of active video games. And currently, what I do now is I don't go out and dance. because I'm still quite awkward. But I will, not to say if you're awkward, you shouldn't do that. You should do that. I'm self-deprecating. But I use virtual reality boxing and dance. I do boxing classes to music and virtual reality. I'll do dance classes. And in real life, I don't feel great about my dance ability, but in virtual reality, listening to T-Pain, I do look like Beyonce when I move. I mean, I must say, I've seen videos. I can verify that it's true. But so I'm a big advocate for dance in general, outside my personal preferences. There's actually a ton of evidence for dance to improve cognition and to improve motor functions like balance and walking
Yeah.
abilities in a variety of populations, including older adults with dementia and individuals with Parkinson's. And so what's so interesting about that is usually as we get into the phases of dementia, it's really hard to find interventions that have been shown to help. But things like dance, things like Tai Chi has a ton of evidence.
Mm.
And these are two interventions that people know about. But of all the people I've coached over the half decade I've worked at PNI rarely see people doing on purpose consistently for their brain health.
What about daily activities that are out there and available to, people? I'm thinking like, is pickleball fit the bill?
It does. Anything that gets you to move and think. And so the way I
Anything
like to
that gets you
break
to move
this,
and think.
yeah, the way I like to break this down is there's three categories of exercise, kind of like how there's three types of macronutrients in nutrition. So with nutrition, you got carbs, fats, and proteins, and you know what goes in that category. For exercise, it's a little more ambiguous for people because there's not a lot of categorizing going on there. So let's do that. So there's aerobic exercise, which is anything that gets your heart rate up. There's resistance training, which is anything that requires use of your muscles. And then there's neuromotor training, or let's call it motor training. And motor training is anything that requires coordination,
Hmm.
reacting to a stimulus, but it doesn't always have to get your heart rate up. For example, yoga and Tai Chi and Pilates, those are neuromotor exercises, but they're more in the mind body category because they don't usually, sometimes they do, but they don't always get your heart rate up. But they could still have cardiovascular benefits, cognitive benefits. They require coordination, flexibility, things like that. And then on the other category of neuromotor side, we have this thing called skill training. And skill training would include racket sports like pickleball, tennis, table tennis, racquetball, any
Hmm.
racket sports. It would
Hmm.
include dance. It would include any kind of martial art. It would include exergaming and dual tasking. Those are in that category as well. And so the idea for people to have a brain healthy exercise program is to do one activity per week at least from each category. So a little bit of aerobic, a little bit of resistance, a little bit of motor, and we can get into like the times per week and the minutes and the intensities and all that. But that's really the goal is to have a diversified brain healthy exercise program like you would a diet or like you would a stock portfolio. But
Hmm.
neuromotor exercise really houses those things that cause us to move and think at the same time, which includes dual tasking and exergaming. Those are just a couple of ways to check off that category. They're not necessarily superior to everything else in that category.
Yeah. So you live in Southern California, and we think of Southern California as people being a little more tuned into exercise and the outdoors and activities. How are we doing in America, especially older Americans, um, on these activities? Are we doing
Well,
them enough?
yeah, I think there's a few different perspectives to have. There's the kind of like optimist perspective of like more information's getting out there, more people are getting this information, and more resources are becoming available for people. But then there's like kind of the pessimistic perspective, which is both are true, both can be true, that over 80% of older adults are not meeting the minimum physical activity guidelines for Americans.
Well, how are
And
you
that
defining older? How are you defining older adults?
some literature uses 60 or 65 years and up. I just like to
Okay.
say active aging adults,
Yeah.
say 50 plus. And so the way I'm kind of talking about this in terms of like these minimum physical activity guidelines, it's quite out there. It's a number that people have heard before. It's not new. It's 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity activity or greater. And that's kind of weird because no one measures much of anything in minutes per week, right? But it's about, if we take 150 divided by 30, we'd have five. I think that's correct. And so we have 5 days a week of 30 minutes of activity. So Monday through Friday, exercising 30 minutes a day. Or if you're going to exercise for an hour, it could be 2 to 3 times a week, roughly.
Hmm.
And so 80% of older adults are not hitting that. And the reason it's important to hit that number is simply because the total number of variable health benefits come from that number. And so they've done, like, researchers have done tons of reviews on, like, what is the minimum dosage of exercise for cancer prevention, for heart health, for bone health, for mental health, for even brain health. And that 150 is that minimum. It doesn't mean less or more isn't beneficial. That's just the minimum dosage to get the most benefit.
Yeah. Interesting to hear you talk about it as a dosage,
Yeah, well, it's so
because it is
interesting
kind of medicine, right? I mean,
yeah, I was just going to say exercise is medicine, and the American College of Sports Medicine has actually started with other organizations this kind of movement called exercise is medicine. And if that is true, if we're going to go forward with that metaphor, then we should know the ingredients of that medicine. We should know the dosage, timing, yes, but also that there's different sub-medicines within this metaphor, if you will. And exercise has also been called a polypill. A polypill is a pill that does multiple things. And of course, it's still a metaphor. Exercise is not literally a pill. Otherwise, pharmaceutical companies would have already tried to mimic those effects. And they wish they could, because they're so diverse and so powerful in what it's able to do. And other researchers have taken that further and called it a neuropolypill, because exercise can increase blood flow to the brain. It can increase brain activity. Over months, it can increase brain size in certain regions. It can slow cognitive decline. It can improve the health of the nervous system. So people have called it a neuropolypill. I've taken it a step even further and called it a more potent neuropolypill, just to add to the alliteration. And I believe the better way to make it a more potent neuropolypill is by adding in more ingredients. And those ingredients are cognitive load, having your exercises be more cognitively demanding, have some aspect of socialization to them, have some aspect of novelty and stimulation and enjoyment. And so if we can add those different things in at the same time, I think without being scientists, we could probably all theorize and perhaps agree that, yeah, that would probably be better. Even if you just feel better and it doesn't actually do anything better to your brain, that's probably a good thing. And I think what people probably notice is if they're part of a group exercise community, that is a very enriching experience. That's not just exercise deriving those mental health benefits or perhaps even cognitive benefits. There's socialization. I think especially for active older adults and those that are socially isolated, socialization is incredibly important. And when we can use exercise as a medium to deliver that as well, well, now we're just delivering even more medicines that are needed.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm sitting here doing the math on my own week and thinking, am I doing enough?
Well, let's break it down. You want to break it down?
Well, I bike to work every day.
Okay, that's good. So that's a good point. So there's a big difference between unstructured physical activity and structured exercise, but there's also some similarities. So what you're describing as biking to work, walking around, doing chores, any of that stuff, that's unstructured physical activity. Those are just physical activities that you do throughout your day that are healthy for you, but are not necessarily counting towards those 150 minutes.
Oh boy.
Because that 150 minutes is structured exercise. And there could be some crossover, but you'd probably agree that there's a difference between going on the exercise bike for 30 minutes to exercise and 30 minutes on the bike to go to work. Those are different contexts.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. And that's why I do jump on the bike or jump on the tread, or, we've, gone full Peloton during the pandemic, which I got to tell you, when you talk about, we used to go to exercise classes, and now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm losing that socialization part of this, right? It's the polypill lost a piece.
Yeah, the polypill lost a piece. Yeah.
And that's kind of I'm wondering if this
and that's actually okay. That's actually okay. It doesn't mean that if you're not socializing during your exercise, it's bad.
No, of course.
I hate socializing during my exercise, because if I'm lifting weights at a gym, I just talk to avoid doing work, and I hate group exercise classes. So I don't get my.
You do?
I do not like group exercise.
Why? You just talked about how socialization is great. Come on.
Absolutely. I just don't get it there.
Okay, all right. Okay. What do you get, is it distracting or you
It's a few things. It's distracting. I get critical of what the instructor is doing. It's not my thing. Plus, I'm
okay,
on a
all
time
right.
crunch. I'm in a PhD program. I work a full-time job.
Oh man.
I'm limited on time. So I've actually stopped going to the gym. I just have my own home gym. I have some dumbbells, a bench, some bands, a TRX, and a virtual reality headset. That's my gym.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of where we're at a little bit.
Yep, I
And
think that's where a lot of people are at. And the way I get my socialization in is, my girlfriend and I will do things, workout related together sometimes, or I will actually play in virtual reality with my brother who lives across the country. So that's another way to connect with people.
there you go.
But I've never liked that format for me personally. I think what's more important than just doing what people say is important is really doing things that are based on your preferences. And so if
Yeah.
I say going to the gym is better for you than working out at home, which is not true, but I'm pushing that on you and it's really causing this resistance, you're less likely to do it. And what's the point of that, right? And I think we need to really design things for behavior change for people and meet people where they're at. And so when people have been recommended, oh, you should do this type of exercise, you should go to a group exercise class, but no one ever stopped to really think like, would they like that? Do they prefer that? They're probably not going to do it. And so I think part of this issue of adherence to the minimum exercise guidelines, especially with older adults, is preference and behavior change. And there's not a lot of health coaching going on. There's a lot of telling going on. And I don't know if
Uh-huh.
you've worked with an older adult. They certainly don't usually enjoy being told what to do without understanding them as a person. And in fact, nobody likes that. That's just human. And so I think for some reason we know the information, and because we know the information, it's like, well, Anthony, we know the information, we know the science, so you should be doing it. There's no reason you shouldn't be doing it, so just do it. Well, that's not very good coaching, right? And so I think that's a problem that we're facing as well in our healthcare system.
So tell us about some success stories when you get people into, into the facility and you change their habits.
Yeah, I have several examples. One example I have is an individual who is about 82 years old. This is like my first year working at PNI. And we sat across the table. He was there for a health coaching session, and we sat down. We were talking more about, exercise and things that he can do. And he actually believed that he only had a limited number of heartbeats in his life. He actually believed this. And when I tell people this, they kind of laugh at it. It's like, that's kind of a ridiculous belief. But he really believed that. And
Wait, so
so
wait. Is he saying when he hits a number, it's lights
it's
out?
done. It's done. Yeah.
Did he know what that number was?
No,
Okay, that would be really hard. All right, go on.
there was just a general, it was a myth
Sense
that
that
he heard and adopted, and
this was
kind of like
it.
the car battery metaphor. And so by exercising more, he'd go faster towards death. That's what he believed.
Wow.
And he wasn't anxious about it. He's just like, nope, not doing that. That's not something I do. I said, well, let's call him Bob. I said, well, Bob, you have a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment as of recently, and I'm sure you don't want dementia either. He said, no, I do not want dementia. I said, which one's scarier for you, dementia or running out of heartbeats? He said, dementia. I'm like, I agree with you. Now, I'm going to give you something that I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm going to summarize the science. I'm a nerd. I do people's homework. Let me do yours. And this is what the science shows. The science shows one of the most powerful things to slow or stop the conversion of mild cognitive impairment to dementia is exercise. And the reason is because there's increased blood flow to the brain, and it's actually good for your heart. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that. I'm going to let you do with that what you will. He sat with it for a few minutes. He said, you could see he was weighing the imaginary issue with the actual real issue, and the real issue
Yeah.
took precedence. And I'm just like, look, I mean, this is what the research is showing, and you can exercise and do nothing, but that's really not going to help you. Of course, other things matter too, nutrition, sleep, but let's just focus on this one for now, because I kind of knew that if we could get this going, we could probably get other things going. And we had that conversation. I said, look, I'm not going to tell you to go, but I want to give you just a couple local exercise resources. You can sign up with Silver Sneakers. It'll cover your LA Fitness membership. I'm going to give you a couple websites, and it's like a restaurant. You can look on the menu, you can pick what you like. If you don't like it, return it, order something else. That's all it is. And
Huh.
so, and then what he did is he picked one. I saw him probably 8 months later, I just ran into him in the hallway, said, Bob, how's it going? He's like, I've been exercising every day since I saw you. I'm like, well, that makes me seem effective. Thank you for that. How's it going? He's like, I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling super sharp. I'm sleeping better because I'm
Wow.
exercising more. He's less stressed. He met several friends at the gym. It's awesome, right?
That's amazing. That is amazing. What was his level of fitness when he arrived if he's been sort of trying to
Very poor.
conserve heartbeats?
Very, very poor. I
He
think
must have been, yeah.
yeah, and a lot of people have gone their whole lives without exercising. And I think we probably all have friends with relatives or ourselves have relatives like, well, I have my grandma Norma and she lived to 102 and she smoked every day and she ate terribly and she never exercised and she lived to 102. I'm like, okay, that could be true. But we have evidence to show like we have healthier pathways here. Just because that evidence exists of your own personal experience doesn't mean it invalidates the evidence we have in science now. And
Yes.
like I have other examples of people that have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease that are in their mid 90s and they want to stay active and maybe recently just lost a spouse. And exercise and the session, maybe a session with me or a session with a trainer a week or a physical therapist is really what's keeping them going. And these people, regardless of their diagnosis, they have a sense of purpose.
Mm.
They have this desire to get out into the world, even if they're not feeling it at the moment. Maybe they have some depression or anxiety, or they're feeling down about their health condition. But they have the desire to experience like we all do. And some people just need that extra nudge or assistance to getting there. And when we start to move our bodies and interact with people and be thinking more and challenging ourselves, it's really quite magical because I think it's really quite natural for us to
Hmm.
do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's literally in our DNA. Right?
Absolutely.
This is what we
Absolutely.
did.
Including play. Play is such an important thing for us too. And to be able to play in the context of movement, I think is so powerful for how we're able to feel afterwards.
I not to dwell on this, but this pickleball trend is just it's extraordinary. I don't know what you think, but it is literally just blowing up everywhere, right? And I've talked to a number of people who were not active at all, didn't do any exercise, and they found pickleball and they're addicted. Now, some of them have torn their Achilles and they've had other injuries that are, you wouldn't
Yeah, it's
expect.
also one of the higher injury rates, but I don't think that should scare people from participating. I think it should just be helping people think twice about conditioning, injury prevention, talking to a physical therapist. Certainly a lot of older
Dynamic
adults.
stretching.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done.
On balance, that's got to be good, right?
Yeah, multi-directional movements
Yeah.
with a motor distraction with social. I mean, it's cognitively demanding. At the same time,
Yes.
I haven't seen any literature that it's helpful for brain health, but that could be because it's new. Maybe I haven't seen it. But it doesn't mean it's not. And certainly, I think pickleball can be a great neuromotor activity, as can many different racket
Well,
sports.
you also have to keep score.
Mhm.
And the
I think that's
scoring is
true. That,
not insignificant, right? You have to think about it, right? I don't know. I'm just
No,
thinking.
you're justifying the cognitive demands that are present within the sport. And you could say that
Yeah.
about other sports too. I don't think there's something particularly uniquely beneficial about pickleball aside from its popularity,
Yeah.
which of course has pros and cons. But I think it's wonderful, and you hear about all these people finding things that really change their life, whether it be pickleball. I don't know if you remember hearing about Pokemon Go, the app that got people wandering around the city looking for Pokemon on their
Yeah.
phone to get more steps in. That changed
Yeah.
people's lives. For me, it was Dance Dance Revolution. For other people, it might be martial arts, could be dance. I think
Hmm.
what's the common thread of those things? The common thread is that there's usually a physical activity of some kind. There's usually some element of gamification.
Yeah.
Um, there's engagement, and there's an element of community. And I think those are the things that are required for people to find these types of activities. No one really ever says like, "Oh, I got on this exercise bike and it really changed my life." Like I haven't heard that. Of course, it's true unless it's like a Peloton. That would make sense because then there's engagement and then there's a community around it, even if it's virtual, or like an uninteractive elliptical where you're just like staring at the wall, watching the news.
No, remember? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
remember
they
those
still
days?
exist. They still exist. And for some people, that is their community, though. So for some
Yeah.
people, they hate
Yeah.
exercising, but then they'll watch the news. They like the news, and they like the people that are next to them on the exercise machines. And we shouldn't poo-poo that. But I mean,
No.
if we think of those common things like, okay, we find community, we find engagement, and we find a physical activity, we put it all together. That there you go, you got that poly pill.
Got you. All right, I have to run a couple more activities by you.
Sure.
Gardening.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
No?
once again, not a structured exercise, but a physical activity that is beneficial.
Okay. All right. Because you're
Sure.
thinking, you're moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
Now, if we put gardening head to head with dance,
Not gonna
you know, yeah, dance is going to probably be superior. Of course, that study hasn't
see.
been done. That's
Yeah.
a wild study. But if we think about volume knobs, think about a scale of 1 to 10 on physical load, 1 to 10 on cognitive load. So on the volume knob scale, gardening would be like what, like a 2 out of 10?
Depends. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, but pretty low,
Depends
right?
how hardcore you go.
Comparatively, something like pickleball would be higher, like anywhere from a 6 to 8 out of 10,
Sure.
right? On the cognitive load, gardening is cognitively demanding, but probably pretty low on that scale. But if you're learning a dance choreography, that volume knob is going
Yes.
to be turned high up.
Yes.
And so it's not to say one's good or bad. It's just asking where are you on those volume knobs? And if we're going to drive actual cognitive improvement, meaning training and not maintenance,
Mm, mm.
like these stimulating activities are really good for maintenance. I don't think gardening is going to move the needle on cognition unless it's really demanding in some ways, but it
Yeah.
probably will. It is better for your brain to do it than not to do it. Because in the absence of gardening, if you're not doing anything, you're watching TV, then I'd say, yeah, gardening's better. It's
Got
got
you.
mental health benefits. We got exposure to nature. Maybe you meet community. But it's not the activity itself. It's what the activity ends up including. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But then when we compare it to things that are higher up those volume knobs, we just have a higher demand on our nervous system and our bodies that likely will move the needle towards these training-based outcomes.
Yeah.
So I hope
You
that could
know,
summarize it a
no,
little
it
bit.
does. It does. I one time I interviewed a guy who was a big investment manager actually down in LA, and to get in the zone and keep his brain sharp for his business, he played ping pong.
Yeah, I'm a huge
And
ping
he,
pong player. Yeah,
are you? You are.
I love ping pong. Yes.
Okay. He thought, and he played tennis like a madman as well. But ping pong for him was the thing. And he
Yeah.
thought it got him into the zone more completely than just about any other activity. And he would bring in, because he had the money, he would bring in these incredible pros to play on his special, table. But that for him it's fast, right? I mean, that
Yep.
fits the bill, right? That hits
Yeah,
your,
it
that's it.
does. And so it's in that neuromotor category, and there's two types of skills. There's closed skill, which is nothing's a surprise. So like an exercise bike is a closed skill.
I'm sorry, closed,
Closed. Yeah, it's a closed skill, meaning
meaning
there's no openness to variability.
I see.
Yeah, on your Peloton, there's really not a lot that can go wrong, I hope.
You're not dodging you're not dodging like nails in the road or
Yeah.
cliffs.
I mean,
Okay,
that's a
got
good
it.
idea. They should do that.
They should do
They should
that.
make that a game. But with dance or with ping pong or even a martial art, it's open skill because the ball or the opponent is doing things that are unexpected. And so
Got
because of that, there's a little bit more impulse control, a little bit more flexibility in your mind.
Sure.
Your frontal lobe has to work a little harder to pay attention because you don't know what's coming next. And that could be the engagement, the fun of it. For me, it's the speed of ping pong. And I played pickleball for the first time a couple of months ago, and I've started as a tennis, not a player, but I like playing tennis. Then I got really into ping pong, and I felt I did really well at pickleball because of my experiences in both of those. Because I feel like
Yeah.
pickleball is
Yeah.
kind of right in the middle. But I can see why he would say that. Now, on the other hand, that's his thing, right? And I think people hyper specialize in something they really, really like, which is good, but they might be missing out on things that they could further benefit from. And so I have individuals that are clients like the gentleman you're describing, and they're very fast processing speed. But what if,
Hmm.
let's just theorize,
Hmm.
what if his short-term memory needed some work? and he avoided dance like the plague. But that's what he needed, maybe as an activity to train that short-term memory.
Yeah. So you're saying don't go down one road completely.
Well, we can do two things. We can,
Variability.
number one, pursue things we enjoy, but
Yeah.
also strongly
Push.
consider the things you're avoiding. Because the reason we avoid those things is because we're usually not good at them and we want to avoid being embarrassed. And to that, I
Yeah.
say, if brain health is the goal, exactly. We should
Well,
be pursuing those things because we're bad at them. And it's about that process of skill acquisition.
okay. Okay. Confession. Yeah, I feel the way you do about dance. I'm self-conscious. Um, I think I enjoy it. I think I would enjoy it on my own in the private, private
Which
at
is
home.
better than not at all, right? So that's
But
how
you know
I enjoy
what?
it. Yeah.
It's really held me back on
Yeah.
that, and I've in talking to you now and in the past, it's an activity that it's staring me in the face.
So the question is, if it's a medicine that doesn't taste very good to you right now, how do we put it into a Flintstones gummy and make it more digestible? And for me, it is through a video game. And for you, it could be, with a partner or a friend or with a class or in a video at home. It doesn't have to
Yeah,
be in person. That is
yeah.
okay. Like there's not like so like no, Anthony, you must go to Argentinian Tango Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 7 p.m. in a dance studio with professionals. Like nobody is saying that, right? But that's what we think. That's what we think. We're like, we got to do that. Like, no, no, no. You can just take a Zumba class on YouTube. Like, that's okay.
Okay, now you're talking. Now you're
Yeah.
talking. That could work. So
That's
this is
right.
really, this is really helpful. I get it. I get it.
And let me just take it a little further. If
Yeah.
dance really isn't your thing, but you're after that like choreography, what about boxing, where there's
Mm,
choreography within the
mm.
box?
Interesting. Okay.
Not
All right.
radically different.
So what I'm getting is that you're all about being flexible and finding alternatives, right? To get people to have them do something they enjoy that challenges them.
That is the current approach, and it seems to be working for most people, even for those who are the most stubborn,
Yeah.
or for persons with cognitive impairment. I find that people prefer this. They
Yeah.
prefer this approach where it's kind of meeting them where they're at and not pushing them beyond their comfort zone in a way that is uncomfortable, frankly. So I think, yeah, this is my coaching style, at least part of it.
So
Um,
last thing, I just before we wrap up, can you just describe the room where this is happening at PNI? Like what all do you have in
Oh,
there?
in the FitBrain program,
Yeah,
sure. We have
what's
about a 3,000 square foot space. It looks like a physical therapy clinic, and we have physical therapists, we have occupational therapists, speech therapists, and we have a giant wall that is interactive with different targets where you're playing letter games, number games. We have big screen TVs where you're interacting with things on the TV. We have something that looks like a clinical Dance Revolution called the Dividot Senso, where you're doing memory. It's the up, down, left, right arrow with its TV with bars on it to hold on to if you struggle with balance a lot. And there's memory games, attention games, reaction time games. We have certain types of treadmills that tilt in different directions while you're on them, while we're giving you cognitive tasks. We have a lot of cool technology.
okay.
I think when people hear about this, they want to see it because they've never seen anything like it. They also want to go there. And I think what we do is awesome. I think what we do is really cool. If you told me when I was a kid that I'd be like helping to start a clinical arcade, I'd just be so excited. I
Kind
just
of a
get to
dream
make,
job.
I have a dream job. I get to make older adults play video games that they enjoy for their benefit. Like, fantastic. However, I'm also spending a lot of time telling people what I just described is not what you need. And like, hopefully, there are, and I've seen more trends of more senior living communities adopting this brain gym model, as well as other gyms in the community across the world. It's very niche right now. It's very small and under the
Mm.
radar, but it is happening. All the products we use are on the market. And we're going to see more of this trend of brain exercise or brain health in health and wellness spaces. But a lot of the time, it's difficult to get access or into those things. And so it's really important to realize that there's actually more data for things like dance and like Tai Chi than there is for what I do currently. And that is
Yeah.
just,
Well, okay.
that's the
Sure.
truth.
Sure.
That's the truth. We're pushing
Yeah.
the edge of innovation by researching and implementing new things, but it's called a lifestyle for a reason. You should be able to do it for the rest of your life. And so I'm
Right.
often pushing people towards things that could fit within that framework. And then furthermore, there's a lot of things that are at home now, or at least in the future will be, and that includes virtual reality. That
Yeah.
includes like the Dance Dance Revolution like device, the Senso that I described, is soon coming out with their own home-based mat, which is like a pressure-sensitive yoga mat that hooks up to your TV to do these things at home. There's things you can download on your computer or iPad that use your webcam to track your body, and so you're skiing downhill with a character, kind of like
Yeah.
the Nintendo Wii, but
Yeah.
without any equipment. And so these things are out now and will continue to come out and be developed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think games, if they're not already, will continue to be just part of our everyday life. And I think that, the New York Times games are really big for people. And so, like, I wonder what the physical component of that will be
There you
in
go.
the near future. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to
No,
see
that
what
makes
that.
perfect sense. Yeah. Ryan, talking to you just makes me, one, want to go out and exercise, and two, I want to come down and see your setup down there.
Yeah, let's play.
I think I can see why you're having success, because your enthusiasm for this is infectious, and that's what we need. we need this. So I really, really appreciate you taking time again.
Yeah,
Uh,
my pleasure. Thank you,
it's a
Anthony.
delight. Yeah. All right. Well, until next time.
All right, looking forward to it. This has been a PNI Hour.